The grand ballroom of the Lottie Hotel smelled of expensive lilies and even more expensive desperation. Nia Williams adjusted the strap of her emerald silk dress, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She didn't belong here, among the silver spoon heirs and the icy socialites of Seoul's elite. But she was here for Marcus. Marcus, the man she'd supported through 3 years of law school. Marcus, who had promised her that tonight, at his family's legacy gala, he would finally introduce her as his fiancée. "Nia, there you are," Marcus said, stepping into the light. His face was a mask of cold stone. "Marcus, is everything okay? You look—" "Quiet," he snapped. The sharpness of his voice drew the attention of the nearby tables. "I've been looking for my mother's vintage Cartier bracelet, the one that went missing from the dressing room 10 minutes ago." Nia frowned, confused. "That's terrible. But why are you telling me?" "Because," Marcus raised his voice, his projection perfect for the crowd now circling them, "security found the empty case in your clutch, Nia." The room went silent. 100 pairs of eyes, mostly cold, mostly judgmental, landed on her. "What? Marcus, that's impossible. I haven't even been near the dressing rooms." Nia's voice trembled. She looked around for a friendly face, but she found only smirks. "I took a chance on you," Marcus continued, his voice dripping with faux disappointment. "A girl from nothing. I brought you into my world, and this is how you repay my family? By stealing our history?" "I didn't take anything," Nia gasped, her eyes stinging. A heavy-set security guard stepped forward, reaching for her arm. "Miss, please come with us quietly. Don't make a scene." "Don't touch me." Nia backed away, her heel catching on the carpet. She stumbled, and for a second she was sure she was going to hit the floor. The laughter started then, low, cruel, and rhythmic. It was the sound of 100 people watching a nobody get put in her place. Then the air in the room changed. It wasn't a noise. It was like a sudden, violent drop in temperature. The laughter didn't fade. It was severed. From the shadows of the VIP balcony, a figure moved. He didn't rush. He walked down the grand staircase with the slow, predatory grace of a king who knew no one would dare get in his way. Jang Min-Seok. The name whispered through the crowd like a death sentence. The security guard immediately retracted his hand, bowing so low his forehead nearly hit his knees. Marcus turned pale, his smug expression collapsing into a mask of pure terror. Jang Min-Seok didn't look at Marcus. He didn't look at the crowd. His dark, piercing eyes were fixed entirely on Nia. He stopped inches from her. He was taller than he looked in the papers, an elegant, lethal pillar of charcoal wool and hidden scars. He reached out, and for a heartbeat, Nia flinched, but he didn't grab her. He took the heavy, custom-tailored blazer from his own shoulders and draped it over her trembling frame. It was warm, smelling of sandalwood and something metallic. Jang Min-Seok turned his head slightly, glancing at Marcus. The look in his eyes wasn't anger, it was boredom, the kind of boredom a lion feels toward an ant. "The bracelet," Jang Min-Seok said, his voice a low, calm velvet that vibrated in the floorboards, "is in your pocket, Marcus. I watched you put it there." Marcus started to stammer. Mr. Jang, you must be mistaken. This is a family matter." Jang Min-Seok stepped forward, one single step, and Marcus nearly fell over his own feet. The silence in the room was now so thick it felt like it was suffocating the guests.
Jang Min-Seok looked back at Nia, his expression softening by a fraction of a millimeter, a ghost of a memory flickering in his gaze. "From this moment on," Min-Seok announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom without him ever having to raise it, "she's under my protection." He paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. "If anyone has a problem with that, they can discuss it with me in private." The room went deathly silent. No one breathed. The dragon has spoken, and the world of Seoul's elite just shifted. If you're ready to see how Nia survives the most dangerous man in Korea, hit that subscribe button now so you never miss a chapter of this saga. Because for Nia, her world was about to turn upside down. No one moved. The queen of the socialites dropped her glass, and it shattered on the marble, but not a single person turned to look. Jang Min-Seok offered his arm to Nia. "Shall we go?" he asked quietly. "This room has become beneath you."
The heavy and expensive doors of the ballroom slammed shut behind them, cutting off the suffocating whispers of the elite. Nia felt like she was floating or drowning. The weight of Min-Seok's blazer on her shoulders was immense, smelling of expensive cedar and something sharper, like gunpowder. Outside, the night air hit her face, crisp and cold. A fleet of black SUVs sat idling at the curb, their headlights cutting through the Seoul mist like the eyes of predators. A dozen men in identical black suits straightened their backs the moment Min-Seok appeared. They didn't just bow, they looked as if they were ready to die for him. "Get in," Min-Seok said. It wasn't a request. Nia hesitated, her hand trembling on the silk of her dress. "Wait, Mr. Jang, I don't even know you. Why did you do that? He's powerful. You just made an enemy of one of the biggest families in Korea for a stranger." Min-Seok stopped at the door of the lead vehicle. He turned, his silhouette framed by the city lights. For the first time, he looked at her, really looked at her. "Marcus is a child playing with his father's toys, and you are not a stranger, Nia Williams." Nia froze. "How do you know my name?" "Because," he stepped closer, his shadow engulfing her. 10 years ago, in an alleyway in Mapo-gu, a girl with a bright yellow backpack found a boy bleeding out behind a dumpster. The police were coming to finish what my enemies started. That girl didn't call them. She hid me. She cleaned a wound that should have killed me, and then she gave me her last 20,000 won so I could disappear." Nia's breath hitched. Memory flooded back. A rainy summer night during her first year as an exchange student. She remembered a boy with eyes like obsidian, shaking with fever, clutching a jagged side wound. She had been terrified, but she couldn't leave him. That was you?" she whispered. "You were just a kid." "I was a ghost," I corrected, "and you gave a ghost a reason to stay in the world of the living. I told myself then, if I ever survived to sit on the throne, I would find the girl in the yellow backpack." He opened the car door. "The debt is long overdue. Now get in. The Lot Hotel is no longer safe for you." As Nia slid into the plush leather interior, a sense of dread began to outweigh her relief. She looked out the tinted window and saw Marcus standing at the hotel entrance, his face purple with rage, frantically calling into his cell phone. "He's calling someone," Nia said, her voice small. Min-Seok sat beside her, the car pulling away with a smooth, violent surge of power. He didn't even glance back at Marcus. "Let him call." Min-Seok said, pulling a sleek silver handgun from a holster hidden beneath his waistcoat and checking the magazine with a clinical click. He looked at Nia, his expression unreadable. But by tomorrow morning, none of those people will own a single won in this city. I don't just protect what's mine, Nia. I erase whatever threatens it. Suddenly, the lead SUV in their convoy braked hard, tire screaming against the asphalt. A heavy delivery truck had swung across the intersection, blocking their path. "Contact!" a voice crackled over the radio in the front seat. Nia's heart stopped. Through the windshield, she saw men jumping out of the truck, their faces covered by masks, holding metal pipes and short-bladed knives. Min-Seok didn't flinch. He didn't even look stressed. He simply reached over, pushed Nia's head down toward the seat, and whispered one command. "Stay low. Don't look at the blood."
The sound of the car door opening was the last normal thing Nia heard. For the next 60 seconds, the world was a symphony of muffled thuds, the sharp crack of bone meeting pavement, and the terrifyingly rhythmic clicking of Min-Seok's dress shoes on the asphalt. Nia stayed pressed against the cool leather seat, her eyes squeezed shut, her hands over her ears. She heard a man scream, a wet, choked sound, and then absolute silence. Not even the wind dared to blow. The car door opened. Nia flinched, pulling the oversized blazer tighter around her. Min-Seok stood there, the moonlight catching the sharp edge of his jawline. His white dress shirt was still perfectly tucked. His hair hadn't moved. The only sign that anything had happened was a single dark droplet of blood on his silver cufflink. "It's over," he said. His voice was as calm as if he'd just stepped out to buy a newspaper. "You can sit up now." Nia sat up slowly, her eyes darting to the window. The street was empty. No bodies, no masks. Only the heavy delivery truck remained, its engine idling uselessly. Min-Seok's men were already moving with surgical precision, clearing the scene as if it were a movie set being struck. "Who were they?" Nia whispered, her voice trembling. "Debt collectors," Min-Seok said, sliding back into the seat beside her. He pulled out a silk handkerchief and wiped the cufflink with a slow, methodical stroke. "Marcus's father owes money to people far less patient than I am. They thought kidnapping you would give them leverage over me." He looked at her, his dark eyes searching hers. They were wrong. You hurt them." The reality of his world finally crashing down on her. "You didn't call the police. You just—" "Nia," he interrupted, his voice dropping an octave. "In this city, I am the police. I am the judge. And tonight, I am your only sanctuary. If you want to go to the authorities, I will drop you at the nearest station. But Marcus has already paid them to ensure you disappear before the sun rises." The weight of his words felt like lead in her stomach. She looked at the black-tinted windows. She was a brilliant architect, a woman who built structures meant to last for centuries, but her own life had crumbled in a single evening. "Why me?" she asked, her voice cracking. "A 20,000 won debt from 10 years ago doesn't buy this kind of protection. Why are you really doing this?" Min-Seok leaned closer, his scent, sandalwood and cold steel enveloping her. He reached out, his thumb grazing the line of her jawline. It was the first time he had touched her skin, and a spark of electricity shot through her, part terror, part something she couldn't name. Because the girl in the yellow backpack was the only person who ever looked at me and didn't see a monster
or a king. She just saw a human being. And I decided then that if I ever owned the world, I would give her a piece of it. The car turned into a private, high-walled estate in the hills of Seongbukdong. The gates were iron, topped with the same dragon crest Nia wore on her dress. As the car stopped, Min-Seok looked at her one last time before the guards opened the door. Tomorrow, the world will wake up and find that Marcus's family empire has vanished. No offices, no bank accounts, no reputation. They will be nothing. He stepped out and offered his hand. But you, Nia, tomorrow you begin your new life. Just know this, my protection is absolute. It is also a cage. Once you walk through these doors, there is no going back to being normal. Nia looked at his outstretched hand. Behind him, the massive stone mansion loomed like a fortress. She thought of her empty apartment, the police who were likely waiting for her, and the man who had tried to ruin her. She took his hand. As they crossed the threshold, the lead guard, a scarred man named Lee, stepped forward and whispered into Min-Seok's ear. Min-Seok's face darkened. "What is it?" Nia asked, sensing the shift. Min-Seok didn't look at her. He looked toward the darkened tree line at the edge of the property. "The Tiger Syndicate," he said quietly. "They know you're here, and they've just declared war on my house to get to you."
The interior of Min-Seok's estate was a masterpiece of cold, modern architecture. Black marble floors, floor-to-ceiling glass, and a silence so heavy it felt physical. But it wasn't empty. As they walked through the foyer, dozens of men in dark suits lined the walls. They didn't look at Nia. They looked through her, their faces like carved granite. "Lee," Min-Seok said, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. The scarred man who had whispered to him earlier stepped forward. Lee Dong-wook, the second in command. He was older, with a jagged line from his temple to his jaw, a souvenir from a war Nia couldn't imagine. "Boss," Lee said, his eyes finally flicking to Nia. They weren't friendly. They were assessing a liability. "The South Sector is agitated. The Tigers are claiming you broke the treaty by interfering with the Lotte Gala. They say the girl is a civilian and doesn't belong under the dragon crest." Min-Seok stopped walking. He didn't turn around, but the air in the room seemed to vanish. "The treaty says I do not interfere with their business," Min-Seok said quietly. "It does not say they can touch my property." Nia flinched at the word property. "I am not property," she said, her voice louder than she intended. Every head in the room turned. The guards' hands moved instinctively toward their jackets. Lee's eyes widened in a mix of shock and offense. No one interrupted the chairman. Min-Seok turned slowly. A small, dangerous smile played at the corner of his mouth. "Property is a legal term in my world, Nia. It means you are untouchable. It means if a hair on your head is harmed, I burn a city block to find the person responsible." "I don't care about your terms," Nia fed, stepping closer to him, her emerald dress shimmering against the black marble. "I am an architect. I build things. I don't belong in a fortress filled with guns and men who look at me like a virus." Lee stepped forward, his voice a low growl. "You should watch your tongue, girl. You are alive because the boss willed it. Do not mistake his kindness for weakness." "And do not mistake my fear for submission," Nia shot back, looking Lee dead in the eye. The room held its breath. A direct challenge to the second in command was usually a death sentence.
Min-Seok let out a low, melodic laugh that sent shivers down Nia's spine. Enough, Lee. She has more fire than half the soldiers in this room. That is why she survived that night 10 years ago. He turned to Nia, his expression turning businesslike. Lee will show you to your quarters. There are no cameras in your bedroom or bathroom. Everywhere else I am watching for your safety. And if I want to leave? Nia asked. Min-Seok walked to a side table and picked up a tablet. He tapped the screen and slid it across the marble toward her. It was a live feed of her apartment. The door was kicked in. Her sketches were torn and scattered across the floor. 3 men in leather jackets were sitting on her sofa, cleaning knives. One of them held up her passport and set it on fire with a gold lighter. "You can leave," Min-Seok said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But you won't make it to the end of the driveway before they find you. And they aren't looking to protect you, Nia." Nia stared at the screen. Her life, the one she had worked so hard for, was ash. She looked up at Min-Seok, realizing the golden cage was her only reality now. "Lee," Min-Seok commanded, "take her up and bring the medic. I want her checked for any injuries from the gala." "I'm fine," Nia muttered. "I didn't ask," Min-Seok replied, already turning back to a map of Seoul spread across a massive digital table. "From this moment on, your health is my business. Sleep, Nia. Tomorrow we go on the offensive." As Lee led Nia up the grand staircase, she looked back. Min-Seok was leaning over the map, pointing to a specific building, Marcus's family headquarters. But it wasn't just Marcus he was targeting. Underneath the building's name, a red light blinked, a GPS tracker. "Whose tracker is that?" Nia whispered to Lee. Lee didn't look back. "That's the Dragon Syndicate's main warehouse, Miss Williams. The boss isn't just protecting you. He's using your insult as an excuse to start the war he's wanted for a long time." Nia realized then she wasn't just a guest. She was the match that was about to set all of Seoul on fire.
The guest suite was larger than Nia's entire apartment, but the air-conditioned chill made it feel like a glass coffin. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marcus's sneer or the dark droplet of blood on Min-Seok's cufflink. Restless, she wrapped Min-Seok's blazer, which she still hadn't taken off, around her shoulders and slipped out into the hallway. The house was a hive of silent activity. Men moved in shadows, checking weapons and encrypted tablets. Nia found herself drawn toward the war room she had seen earlier. The door was ajar. Inside, Min-Seok was surrounded by his lieutenants. They were staring at a 3D blueprint of a massive industrial complex, the Dragon Syndicate's main distribution hub. "The perimeter is reinforced concrete," Lee was saying, his voice tight. "The only way in is the front gate. It's a kill box. If we go in, we lose half our men before we even reach the inner sanctum." Min-Seok stared at the blue lines, his jaw tight. "There has to be a structural weakness. Every fortress has a crack." "There isn't, boss. We've run the schematics through every tactical program we have." Nia stepped into the light. "Your programs are looking for military entries. You're not looking at the bones of the building." The room went silent. Lee looked ready to physically eject her, but Min-Seok held up a hand. His eyes met hers, curious. "Explain." Nia walked to the digital table. Her fingers, usually shaking, were steady the moment they touched a blueprint. She swiped, rotating the 3D waddle. "This building was originally a 1970s textile factory," Nia said, her professional voice taking over.
See these support pillars? They aren't load-bearing for the current roof. They're decorative covers for the original HVAC ventilation shafts. She pointed to a seemingly solid wall near the back of the warehouse. Because of the humidity in Seoul, factories from that era required breathing foundations. There's a sub-basement crawl space here that leads directly into the central server room. It's too small for a man in tactical gear, but it's a direct line to their security override. The lieutenants looked at each other, then back at the map. "She's right," one whispered. "The thermal scans show a pocket of air right there." Min-Seok looked at Nia, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "You just found a way to bypass a massacre, Nia." "I didn't do it for you," she said. Her heart was racing. "I did it because I don't want more blood on my conscience." "In my world," Min-Seok said, stepping closer until he was in her personal space, "intelligence is more lethal than a bullet. You just handed me the gun." Nia isn't just a guest anymore. She's the architect of war. Join the inner circle by subscribing to the channel so you're here for every strategic strike. But as the blueprints faded, a much louder sound was about to tear through the estate. Suddenly, the house shook. A deafening boom echoed from the front gates. The red emergency lights began to pulse, casting the room in a bloody hue. "They're here," Lee shouted, drawing his weapon. "The tigers didn't wait for us to move. They've breached the outer wall." "Nia, get behind the desk," Min-Seok commanded. But as he reached for his own weapon, he stumbled. His face went pale, and he gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. Nia saw it then, a dark stain spreading across the side of his white shirt. "You're bleeding," she gasped. "From the alley, the sniper shot? You said it was a graze." "It's a complication," Min-Seok hissed, his breathing ragged. "Lee, get her to the panic room, now!" "I'm not leaving you like this," Nia said. The memory of the teenage boy in the alleyway flashed before her eyes. He had been a king for 10 years, but in this moment he was just that dying boy again. She grabbed a medical kit from the wall. Outside, the sound of automatic gunfire erupted. The tigers were in the foyer. "Lee, hold the door!" Nia yelled over the chaos. She looked at Min-Seok, who was sliding toward the floor. "You told me I was under your protection. Well, right now, Min-Seok, you're under mine." Nia rips open Min-Seok's shirt to reveal a jagged wound that is far worse than he let on. As she presses a bandage to his side, the door to the war room begins to buckle under the weight of a battering ram. The tigers are seconds from breaking in, and the most dangerous man in Seoul is too weak to stand.
The reinforced metal and wood door to the war room groaned, the hinges screaming under the pressure of the Dragon Syndicate's battering ram. Dust shook from the ceiling, coating the digital blueprints Nia had just been analyzing. "Lee, the door!" Min-Seok coughed, his voice raspy. He tried to raise his weapon, but his hand shook, the heavy steel of the gun clattering against the marble floor. "I'm holding it, boss, but there's too many of them," Lee shouted, firing his suppressed pistol through the wood of the door. "Get to the panic room, now!" Nia didn't move. She couldn't. She looked at the wound in Min-Seok's side, a jagged, ugly tear from a high-caliber round that had clearly been reopened during the attack on the way from the gala. He had been bleeding out while standing tall for her. "You idiot!" Nia whispered, her hands covered in his dark, warm blood. "You were dying this whole time." "I told you," Min-Seok gasped, his eyes fluttering. "You were under my protection. I don't break my word." The door buckled. A gap appeared. Nia saw the glint of a mask and the barrel of a shotgun. In that second, Nia's normal life ended.
She didn't scream. She didn't run. She grabbed the tablet from the table, the one controlling the estate's structural integrity. "Lee, drop!" she screamed. Nia slammed her palm onto the emergency seismic seal icon, a feature she'd noticed in the building's architectural bones. A massive, 5-ton slab of reinforced titanium dropped from the ceiling, slamming into the floor with a bone-shaking thud. It missed Lee by an inch, sealing the war room off from the rest of the house. The sound of the battering ram became a dull, distant thumping. They were safe, for now, but they were trapped in a soundproof box with a dying king. Silence fell over the room, broken only by the hum of the servers and Min-Seok's labored breathing. Nia dragged him against the server racks, using her dress, the expensive emerald silk, to tear into strips for a tourniquet. "Why?" Min-Seok murmured, his head lolling back against the cold metal. "You could have let them in. You could have negotiated. They would have let you go just to watch me die." Nia paused, her hands trembling as she tied the silk tight around his waist. She looked at him, really looked at him, not as a monster, but as the boy from the alley. "Because 10 years ago, I didn't save a mafia boss. I saved a boy who had nobody. And tonight, you did the same for me. I don't care about your throne, Min-Seok. I care about the fact that you're the only person who stood up for me when the whole world was laughing." Min-Seok reached out, his bloody finger staining the skin of her arm. It wasn't a grip of power. It was a reach for connection. "Nia," he whispered, "if we get out of this, the tigers won't stop. They've seen you now. They know you're my heart. That makes you the most hunted woman in Asia." "Then we'd better make sure they don't get out of this house alive," Nia replied. She looked at the digital monitor. "Lee, how many of them are in the foyer?" Lee, still catching his breath, looked at the security monitors. "At least 20. We're pinned." Nia's eyes narrowed, scanning the architectural blueprints again. "No, we aren't. This room is directly above the main fire suppression chemical tanks. If I override the pressure valves from this tablet, you'll flood the foyer with CO2 gas," Lee finished, a grin spreading across his scarred face. "They'll be unconscious in 30 seconds. "Do it," Min-Seok commanded, his voice regaining a sliver of its usual steel. He looked at Nia with a mixture of awe and something deeper, something dangerous. "My architect, you're not just building houses anymore. You're building an empire." Nia hit the override. On the monitor, we watched as a thick white fog engulfed the masked invaders. They collapsed like rag dolls. But as the fog cleared, a single figure remained standing near the back. He was wearing a high-grade rebreather mask. He looked directly into the security camera, held up his cell phone, and pressed a button. A massive explosion rocked the base of the mansion. The floor beneath them tilted. The indestructible war room began to groan as the supports Nia had relied on were blown apart from the inside. "The traitor," Lee hissed. "Someone told them exactly where the structural load points were." Nia looked at the monitor. The man in the mask pulled it off. It was Marcus, her ex-fiancé. He wasn't just a spoiled heir. He was working with the tigers, and he was smiling.
The mansion groaned, a deep, metallic scream that vibrated through Nia's teeth. The floor tilted at a sickening 15-degree angle. On the monitor, Marcus blew a kiss to the camera before the feed cut to static. "He's destroying the foundation," Nia gasped, her architect's brain instantly calculating the load-bearing failure. "Min-Seok, if we stay here, this room becomes our tomb." Lee grabbed Min-Seok's other arm, hoisting the wounded boss up. "Boss, the private elevator is dead. We have to use the laundry chute. It's the only vertical shaft not tied to the main structural pillars." They moved through the tilting hallway like ghosts in a sinking ship.
Every few seconds, another explosion rocked the lower levels. Marcus wasn't just trying to kill them, he was erasing the evidence of Min-Seok's empire. They reached the service exit just as the sun began to bleed over the Seoul skyline. The air was thick with the scent of burning cedar and expensive insulation. Waiting for them at the edge of the driveway was a single white Lamborghini, Marcus. He leaned against the hood, a cigarette dangling from his lips, surrounded by 20 Dragon Syndicate soldiers with submachine guns. "Nia, honey," Marcus called out, his voice amplified by the morning silence. "I see you found the ultimate project." Nia stepped forward, Min-Seok's blood still wet on her hands. The emerald dress was shredded, her hair a wild halo of curls and dust. She looked nothing like the trophy Marcus had tried to mold. "You blew up a residential estate, Marcus," Nia said, her voice trembling with a cold, sharp rage. "There are staff in there, families. You're a murderer." "I'm a businessman, Nia," Marcus laughed, gesturing to the burning mansion. "Min-Seok was an obstacle to the new trade deal between my family and the Tigers, and you were just the bait to get him into one room without his army." He flicked his cigarette toward her. "Come back to me now, tell the police he kidnapped you, and I might let you live as my maid. Otherwise," he nodded to the gunman. Min-Seok leaned heavily on Lee, but he forced himself to stand straight. He looked at Nia, then at Marcus. "You made one mistake, boy. And what's that? Chairman. You think Nia is the bait." Min-Seok's eyes flashed with a lethal spark. "But I didn't come to the gala to save her from you. I went to the gala because 10 years ago she saved me from your father." Nia turned, her eyes wide. "What?" "Marcus's father was the one who stabbed me in that alley, Nia," Min-Seok whispered, loud enough for Marcus to hear. "He was the silent partner of the Tigers back then. I've been dismantling his life for a decade. Marcus isn't protecting his family honor. He's trying to stop me from releasing the files that prove his father is a serial killer." The silence that followed was absolute. The soldiers shifted uncomfortably. They were mercenaries, not monsters. Marcus's face contorted. Kill them all now!" But before a trigger could be pulled, a swarm of black motorcycles roared over a nearby hill. Dozens of them. They weren't wearing tiger colors. They were wearing the dragon crest. "You thought I only had one house," Min-Seok smirked, even as he began to lose consciousness. "I own the city, Marcus. You just own a car." In the chaos of the arrival of Min-Seok's reinforcements, Marcus jumped into his car and sped away. Lee went to chase him, but Nia grabbed his arm. "No," she said, "let him go." "He'll escape," Lee barked. "No, he won't," Nia said, holding up the tablet she had grabbed from the war room. "I didn't just override the gas, I rerouted his car's GPS and locked the electronic doors when he leaned against the hood. He isn't driving to the airport, he's driving straight to the Seoul Metropolitan Police Headquarters with a trunk full of Min-Seok's gift, the evidence against his father." Min-Seok leaned heavily on Lee, but he forced himself to stand straight. He looked at Nia, then at Marcus. "Stay," he whispered, before his eyes finally closed. "Or walk away, Nia. You're free." Nia looks at the burning mansion, then at the unconscious man who risked everything for a 10-year debt. She looks at her bloody hands. "I can't go back to building houses, Lee," her voice sounding like a different woman's. "The foundation is gone."
The private wing of Seoul National Hospital was no longer a place of healing. It was a war room. Outside the operating theater, the air was thick with the smell of antiseptic and the unvoiced fury of 30 Dragon Syndicate soldiers.
Min-Seok was behind double doors, a team of surgeons fighting to pull 3 silver-tipped bullets from his abdomen. Lee stood by the window, his hand never leaving his holster. "The elders are coming, Nia. They heard the boss is down. They don't care about the girl in the yellow backpack. They care about the succession." "I'm not a successor," Nia said, wiping a smudge of dried blood from her cheek. She had changed into a pair of black tactical fatigues Lee had found for her, the emerald silk dress now a rag in a trash can. "I'm just the person who isn't going to let them tear this city apart." The elevator chimed. 3 men stepped out. They were old, dressed in traditional high-end silk suits, their faces maps of 1,000 betrayals. These were the Dragon Elders, the men who had ruled before Min-Seok took the throne by force. "Where is he?" the eldest, Chairman Park, demanded. He didn't even look at Nia. He looked at Lee. "Move aside, Lee. If Min-Seok is incapacitated, the seal returns to the council." Lee hesitated. His loyalty was to Min-Seok, but the syndicate's laws were ancient. "The seal stays where the boss left it," Nia said, stepping into the center of the hallway. Chairman Park finally looked at her, his lip curled in a sneer. "And who are you? The foreigner he pulled from the gutter? You have no standing here. This is a Korean bloodline, a Korean legacy." "I am the woman who saved his life twice," her voice dropping into that calm, dangerous register she had learned from watching Min-Seok. "And as of 4 hours ago, I am the only person who has the encryption keys to every bank account, shell company, and weapon depot the Dragon Syndicate owns." The elders froze. "You lie," Park hissed. "Check your phones," Nia countered. On cue, every elder's device chimed. Nia had spent the last 2 hours with Lee's tech team, using the tablet from the war room. She hadn't just locked the accounts, she had rerouted the syndicate's entire digital infrastructure through a server she designed, using architectural logic. "I've placed the syndicate's assets into a structural dead man's switch," Nia explained, walking toward Park until she was inches from his face. "If my heartbeat stops, or if I don't enter a code every 6 hours, the entire fortune of the Dragon Syndicate is donated to the Seoul Metropolitan Police Pension Fund. You'll be kings of a kingdom with 0 won." The hallway went deathly silent. The soldiers, who had been skeptical of Nia, now looked at her with a new kind of terror and a sliver of respect. "You would destroy us all," Park whispered. "I would burn this city to the ground before I let you traitors take advantage of a man who is currently bleeding for you. Now sit down. You will wait for the surgeons to finish. You will provide the soldiers for the perimeter. And if I hear one more word about bloodlines, I'll delete the Swiss accounts first." Lee watched her, stunned. When the elders finally retreated to the waiting chairs, he leaned in and whispered, "You don't actually have a dead man's switch, do you?" Nia leaned against the wall, her legs finally starting to shake. "No, it's a bluff based on a structural bypass I used for high-rise security. If they had a decent IT guy, they'd figure it out in 10 minutes. "Well," Lee smiled, "it's a good thing our IT guy is currently terrified of you." Suddenly, the red light above the operating room turned green. A surgeon stepped out, looking exhausted. He looked at the elders, then at Lee, but his eyes settled on Nia. He seemed to recognize who held the real power in the room. "He's stable," the surgeon said, "but there was a complication. The toxins on the bullets were designed to cause neurological damage. He's awake, but he can't speak. Not yet." Nia rushed into the recovery room.
Min-Seok was pale, hooked up to a dozen monitors. His eyes snapped open when she entered. He couldn't talk, but he reached out his hand, palm up. Nia took it. He squeezed her hand 3 times. I love you? No. He pulled her closer and used his finger to trace a single letter on the palm of her hand. L. L? Nia whispered. Lee? No, Lee is here. Min-Seok's eyes went wide with urgency. He shook his head. He traced it again. L-U-C. Nia felt the blood drain from her face. Who is Lucy, Min-Seok? Before he could answer, a nurse screamed in the hallway. An explosion, much smaller this time, like a flashbang, erupted near the nurse's station. A voice came over the hospital intercom. It wasn't Marcus. It was a woman's voice, cold and melodic. Min-Seok, darling, you didn't think I'd let a little architect take my place, did you?
The hospital lights flickered, then died, plunged into the eerie red glow of the backup generators. In the doorway, silhouetted against the emergency strobes, stood a woman who looked like she had stepped out of a noir film. The ghost of the dragon has returned, and she isn't looking for peace. Subscribe and hit the bell to ensure you're here for the final showdown between the architect and the assassin. The choice Min-Seok makes next will change everything. Lucy Han. She was dressed in leather and silk, a silent, suppressed pistol in her hand. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like the person who taught Min-Seok how to kill. Lucy? Lee's voice cracked. He lowered his weapon, his hand shaking. We buried you in Jeju 3 years ago. The car went over the cliff. Water is a forgiving mistress, Lee, Lucy said, her voice a purr that chilled Nia's blood. She stepped into the room, ignoring the elders, ignoring the guards, and walked straight toward Min-Seok's bed. Nia didn't move. She stood between the bed and the woman who claimed to own the man lying in it. Move, little architect, she said, her eyes scanning Nia with professional disdain. I've watched the news. You're a cute distraction, a charity project, but the dragon needs a queen, not a librarian. If you were his queen, Nia said, her voice remarkably steady despite the gun pointed at her chest, you wouldn't have stayed dead for 3 years while he bled for this syndicate. You wouldn't have waited until he was too weak to fight to show your face. Lucy laughed, a sharp, metallic sound. I stayed dead to dismantle his enemies from the shadows. I'm the reason the tigers didn't kill him years ago. I am his shield. You're just the girl who gave him a bus fare. She leveled the gun at Nia's forehead. Now step aside. I'm taking him to a private facility. The elders have already agreed. The foreigner's rule ends tonight. Nia looked at Chairman Park. The old man wouldn't meet her eyes. He had made a deal. Lucy was one of them. She was blood. She was history. Min-Seok? Nia whispered, turning to the bed. Min-Seok's eyes were wide, fixed on Lucy. He was struggling to breathe, his heart monitor spiking into a frantic, rhythmic beep, beep, beep. He reached out, but not toward Nia. His fingers brushed Lucy's sleeve. Nia felt a coldness settle in her chest that was sharper than any bullet. The power fantasy was crumbling. She had risked everything for a man who was now reaching for his past. See, Lucy smirked, grabbing Min-Seok's hand. He knows where he belongs. Wait,
Nia said, stepping back toward the medical monitors. "If you take him, you take his medicine. He's on a specific neuroblocker. If he leaves this IV drip for more than 10 minutes, his brain will seize." Lucy's face contorted with rage. She pressed the barrel of the gun at Nia's temple. "Unlock it, now." "Kill me," Nia challenged, her eyes burning with a fire that even Lucy hesitated. "And watch the man you love die 10 seconds later. I've spent my life studying how structures hold together, Lucy. I know exactly which brick to pull to make the whole building fall." The tension in the room was a physical weight. Lee moved his gun back to Lucy. The elders were sweating. Then a weak, wet sound came from the bed. Min-Seok had grabbed Lucy's wrist, not in a caress, but in a crush. He pulled her down, his eyes filled with a terrifying, lucid hatred. He didn't have his voice, but he had his strength. He looked at Nia and gave a single, firm nod. Nia realized then he wasn't reaching for Lucy because he loved her. He was reaching for her to keep her close enough to kill. He had traced Lucy on Nia's hand, not as a name of longing, but as a warning. "He doesn't want you, Lucy," Nia said, her voice echoing in the silent ward. "He wants you dead." Suddenly, the hospital's exterior glass shattered. Rappelling lines dropped from the roof, but these weren't Dragon soldiers. These were Dragon Syndicate elite commandos. Lucy cursed, spinning around to fire at the window. "The Tigers, they followed me. They used me to find the room." In the chaos, the Tigers threw a smoke grenade. The room vanished in gray mist. Nia felt a hand grab her arm, hard. "Nia, get him to the freight elevator," Lee's voice screamed through the fog. But as Nia reached for Min-Seok's bed, she felt the cold steel of a blade against her throat. Through the smoke, a voice whispered in her ear, "The architect or the boss? Let's see who the dragon saves first."
The smoke from the grenades was a gray shroud, smelling of sulfur and burnt rubber. Nia felt the cold bite of a knife at her throat. Through the haze, Lucy's voice hissed in her ear. "If I can't have the throne, Nia, I'll leave him with nothing but your corpse." But Lucy had made one fatal mistake. She treated Nia like a victim, not an architect. Nia knew exactly where they were standing, directly over the hospital's pneumatic tube system, a series of high-pressure air shafts used to move medicine between floors. "You should have studied the floor plans," Nia whispered. Nia slammed her heel down on the manual release lever of the floor hatch she had scouted earlier. The metal plate hissed open. Lucy stumbled, her balance breaking for a split second. Nia twisted, grabbing Lucy's wrist, and shoved her toward the opening. With a scream of rage, the ghost of the dragon vanished into the darkness of the maintenance shaft. The smoke began to clear. 5 Tiger commandos were leveling their rifles at Min-Seok's bed. Lee was down, clutching a shoulder wound. Min-Seok struggled to sit up, his eyes burning with a desperate, helpless fury. He couldn't speak, he couldn't reach his gun. Nia didn't hesitate. She grabbed the heavy medical defibrillator paddles from the crash cart. "Clear!" she yelled. She didn't use them on a heart. She slammed the charged paddles into the pool of conductive saline solution that had spilled from the IV bags during the struggle. A massive blue arc of electricity surged through the wet floor. The Tiger commandos, thoroughly drenched and soaking wet from the rain outside, were standing in the pool of conductive saline solution. Instantly, they were thrown backwards by the sheer power of the electrical surge. They hit the walls, twitching and unconscious. Silence returned to the room, broken only by the frantic beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor. Nia dropped the paddles, her hands shaking so hard she had to grip the edge of the bed to stay upright. She looked at Min-Seok. He was staring at her, his chest heaving, a single tear tracing a path through the dust on his face. He reached out. This time his grip was firm. He pulled her down until their foreheads touched. "Nia," his voice was a broken thread, but it was there. "You saved us." "I told you," Nia whispered, a sob breaking through her voice, "under my protection." 1 month later. The reconstruction of the Dragon estate was nearly complete, but it wasn't a fortress anymore. It was a blend of glass, light, and African mahogany, Nia's signature design. Marcus was in a high-security prison, awaiting sentencing. Chances were high he would get a life sentence. Lucy was gone, vanished into the underworld, a ghost once more, but one who knew better to return to Seoul. Min-Seok stood on the balcony, his black suit tailored to hide the scars. He looked every bit the king again, but he wasn't standing alone. Nia stood beside him, wearing a dress of gold silk, her hair braided with silver thread. In her hand she held the Dragon seal, the digital and physical key to the syndicate. The elders stood in the courtyard below, bowing so low their heads touched the stone. They weren't bowing to Min-Seok. They were bowing to the woman who had outsmarted, outplayed, and outlived them all. Min-Seok turned to her, a rare, soft smile on his face. He leaned in, his voice a low velvet. "They are waiting for your command, Nia. What is the first order of the new dynasty?" Nia looked out over the city of Seoul, a city she had arrived in with nothing but a yellow backpack. Now she owned the skyline. "The first order?" Nia smiled, looking into his obsidian eyes. "Together we stop being a mafia. We start being a legacy. From this moment on, we build things that can never be broken." Nia stood there reflecting how in the beginning people had laughed at her because she was a stranger. Then they feared her because she was a survivor. But now they knelt for her because she was the only one who knew how to turn a cage into a kingdom. In the gilded underworld, a kingdom is only as strong as the heart that protects it, and hers was the strongest there was.